mental illness be a cause worth supporting? We're going to find out today thanks to my guests, Enza Cecchia and Benny Caringi, coming to us all the way from Woodbridge in Canada. Thank you so much for being on this show today.
Thank you for having us.
Well, Enza and Benny, you are the co-founders of Hats On for Awareness, and I wanted to understand, what was this organization and why did you start it?
Well, the organization is about raising awareness about mental illness and addiction, and someday our dream is to eradicate the stigma that's associated with it so that people will speak just as freely about mental illness and addiction in a way that they speak about cancer or diabetes or leukemia or any other illnesses that they're affected with.
Okay. Why do you feel that there's a stigma attached to mental illness? I mean, there are a few years, or actually maybe a few decades, maybe years is too short, but a few decades ago, when somebody died of cancer, we really didn't say it was cancer. And in the same way, mental illness, sometimes it's hidden, or we kind of, use other words or other terms. Why do you think it's not out in the open the way cancer is and other illnesses, diabetes, etc.?
I think a big part of that is it's an illness that's really, we don't understand it. We don't understand what causes it. And it's when you don't understand something, it's not black and white, you tend to kind of run away from it or just try to not deal with it. So like cancer, somebody tells you they have cancer, well, the doctors will tell you how to treat it and what have you. When you have a mental illness, it's not quite the same. It's not like, well, take a drug and you'll feel better. There's so many complications to the illness that we don't understand. So the whole part of raising awareness is really education to understand so that we can actually openly talk about it. Once you can talk about it, that's a huge part of the recovery. Okay. So you can actually sit there and talk to friends and family. So then that opens up a support structure from within, and so you don't feel so embarrassed. The stigma is, you've been told where if you don't, not feeling well mentally, we all say, well, snap out of it, get over it. Well, it's not like that simple. We can't just get over cancer, so why can we just get over a mental illness, right? And that's the stigma that it's really starting to grow. But we have a long road ahead of us, but we're definitely on the right path.
Okay. So, other than being extraordinarily stylish, there's another reason why you're wearing these hats, and it's really part of your logo. It's part of your brand. So it would be interesting to understand why that came about and why you chose the hat as the symbol.
Well, it's really not a surprise. We did it very consciously, and the whole idea was turning around the whole idea that when you're ill with something that you don't want to share, you might hide, the incognito, sunglasses, hat, to try and disguise yourself. And we felt, let's take that same thing and make it festive, and let's put it on to actually talk about having the illness, not hiding behind it. So, and it's been quite successful.
Okay. Well, I'm sure. I mean, your fascinator looks phenomenal, and Benny, you look stylish as like crazy. But I wanted to.
Enza, don't you know?
Exactly. I think some people are watching this and they're thinking, well, okay, I'm sorry, I'm lost. This is, I'm an entrepreneur. This is supposed to be a business show. Why are we talking about mental illness? I just want to know about strategies to help, move my business forward. But the reality is there's some interesting numbers, and I'll let you share them, about mental illness. And the illness affects a lot of us, and affects our daily lives, our businesses, the relationships we have with our families, with our friends. So we could definitely choose to ignore the signs, or we can become aware that some of the mood swings that we have, or some of the ways we're feeling, maybe just more than, it's just, I'm not feeling that great today. Can you talk about some of the numbers? That some of them are a little scary, actually.
Well, you bring up a great point. I mean, in Canada alone, I think the numbers were close to $51 billion lost with employees, 51 billion with a B, lost with employees missing work.
$51 billion?
Billion.
So in America, I mean, we could just assume it's like 2 or 3 times that, if not more.
And that's probably what's reported in terms of how they look at what's reported. But at the same time, it's one of those things, getting back to, if you're not really aware of it, you don't really want to, you can't open up about why you're not feeling well. So as an employer, well, you just want people to work. Well, if they're not mentally there at work, they're really not going to be productive. Whereas now, if we're aware of it and we can work with employees that are not feeling well, come across as somebody we understand what you're going through and support them, as opposed to just being, get to work, you got to get things done, what have you. I think we're going to get much further on a production level, but lifestyle as well. Work will always be there. Work is there every single day, but really you have to make it a point where mentally you feel well and you go to work happy, and you basically transfers to your family lifestyle and what have you, and you have a lot to
it's they say 500,000 people don't show up for work every day in Canada with mental illness related illnesses. So think about not just the 500,000 that don't show up, but the stress and the impact that the absence of those people cause to each of these companies.
Absolutely.
So it's really a domino effect as well. Everybody loses out from it, not just the sufferer.
Absolutely, what you just said is actually very true, Enza, but also we're talking about days of work, but what if somebody is dealing with something that's really heavy, and it's more than a day? One day becomes a week, 1 week becomes 2. I mean, that definitely has an impact on a business owner, and it's more than, I'm just not feeling well. It could really be something that, quote unquote, is out of their control. They being the employee suffering from mental illness.
It isn't. I mean, I think employers now are all, there's kind of the landscape has changed. They're all really working with the insurance companies to say, how do we get people well? In my own business, we have wellness people that are coming in and looking at everybody's personal needs on a confidential basis and providing the medical or naturopathic solutions to whatever they're dealing with. Because if your employees are well, then they're happy, and if you're happy, your business is thriving. So they all go hand in hand, and employers definitely are not ignoring this any longer, that's for sure.
And what I'd like to add in terms of to all the business people out there, when they say, and everybody's said it, where they say, I just feel like I'm in a rut. That's a huge word, because that rut really has everything to do with mental health. When you're in a rut and you can't really snap out of it, well, mentally you're not well enough to actually snap out of it. So you have to maybe look outside of what's causing the issues so that you can actually start dealing with it. I don't know how many times people go to lunch, and for us, I know I can speak for Enza and myself, when we do have lunch with the business associates, they feel open to talk about some issues they're having personally or at home or what have you, because now they see what we represent, and the way they feel after that hour lunch, it's almost like they had a therapy session with a life coach, a therapist, and that really opens them up to saying, you know what, maybe I really do need to address this and not hide behind it anymore.
Okay.
And that's been huge for us.
Give them the confidence to seek whatever it is they're going to need by the camaraderie that says, we know what it's about, we're committed to making a difference, and all of a sudden they feel like they're not at it alone, and they'll look for treatment and ways of getting better.
And I was actually going to add to what Benny just said. When you have cancer, you feel very open now anyways to say to people, okay, you know what, I have cancer. I mean, I know that one of the clients that I have, she seeked out help when she found out her diagnosis, and I was one of the people that she contacted. I was extraordinarily honored that she would include me on that list, because I mean, she's just a client, it's not somebody I know personally, but I was able to put her in contact with somebody who I interviewed, Lauren Miller, a brilliant woman who has dealt with the situation, and so I said to her, listen, Lauren can provide you the support that you need. I can't. But mental illness, I'm not sure if somebody is feeling like, okay, this rut has been going on for a long time. I'm not sure if people would feel as comfortable saying, you know what, I think I'm suffering from mental illness and I need some help, because all of a sudden that opens a can of worms and stigma, and people can start having some preconceived notions, and that really can change the relationships that you have with others. So it is interesting that when with business associates, they have they're in contact with you, they feel safe enough, because I think that's the whole idea of feeling safe, that you can say to somebody, you know what, it's just not working. I've been in a rut for a long time. I think it's more serious than that. Yeah. So it is very important to feel safe in order to open up.
And you know, everything is there on our website to connect with CAMH, Center for Addiction and Mental Health here in Toronto. It's one of, I think, the top 5 in all of the world. We're so fortunate to have them. And our goal is just to have a platform where we can raise the funds so they can continue the amazing work and reach out to more and more people.
So, Enza, if I could go back to sort of the impact that mental health has on entrepreneurs and whatnot, if it's okay to use your example, I think you're in business, you have a very successful decor design firm, and there was a point in time where you were in a rut. Is it possible to share that and share the impact that it had not only on your business but also on your family?
Absolutely. I mean, this is what Hats On is all about. When we first started, that was the evening of our bash. We invited our closest friends, and I told my family story. The tragedy with my father and my own personal battles with depression. I've had 6 major episodes, medication and other treatments. And I hope that when people hear my story, they look and say, wow, she went through all of that, and she's leading a normal life. Mm-hmm. She's just more aware that she has to be a little more kind of listening to her body when things start to change. And so far it's been like that. Everybody said, thank you so much for sharing your story. And it helps others who maybe are not willing to share their story say, well, maybe I've overcome it. Maybe I can talk to that person, see what their strategy was to overcome it. Okay. So definitely.
Your case is quite serious, six episodes, and I know your father's case is one of the more extreme cases. I don't know if you want to share that.
Sure. It's all about sharing. Sharing is caring, and we really do care.
Oh, sharing is caring. I like that.
My father was injured at work and was unable to do work or do any of the beautiful hobbies that he loved to do. The pain, of course, the pain, constant pain. Before we knew it, he was very deeply depressed, and on December 19th, 1988, he took his life. And the shock to us, apart from the obvious turmoil, was that how didn't we see this coming? He was not the type of person, he was not a quitter. He had accomplished so many things in his life at a young age that he had persevered. We just didn't think it was an option. What we know now is it doesn't matter if the person is of a certain personality. When the chemicals are there in the brain or the lack of them, it makes everybody that way. And we didn't even know that simple fact. It's nobody's fault, it's just the way it was back then, 23 years ago. And that's when I, shortly after the turmoil was something that I was living with, I thought, there needs to be something done about this, and I'd really like to help, thinking that I would, volunteer or work with other organizations to do my part. The way it evolved is a really great story. Mm-hmm. You cut it anywhere you like, Ben.
What happened was a short version of it, but basically Enza was telling me her story about her father and what she's been through and what have you, and she just mentioned that she'd love to give back some way and somehow get involved with CAMH to give back, and I just mentioned that, well, CAMH is really one of our clients.
Oh, okay.
30 years, and from that, she was like, wow, so we can do something. Can you do something together? And right away I said, not a problem at all. Any way I can help, and really we had no intention of anything at that point, and it just evolved from that quick conversation, and then our minds started racing, and here we are today.
Wow.
I add to that, Benny, I remember what touched me was he said, I've been going there since I was 12 with my father, and I know what those people go through, and I've always felt badly. So the heartstring, although from a different point of my experience, was definitely there, and really the compassion for what he had seen at a young age. So it was like I spoke it, immediately said, let's do it together, and that's it. So we were co-chairs really from the minute I spoke the word, and I never looked back. Same for you.
So Benny, you've had direct sort of contact with sort of the impact of mental illness through your father.
Well, I'll tell you why we were there. In terms of, it was on a business level where we basically have been supplying window coverings to the CAMH facility in Toronto.
Okay.
So obviously I was just a helper for my dad. I still remember the first day I went there, I was petrified. I didn't understand where we were even going. And seeing people walking around in a daze and what have you, I was so scared that it was totally out of my realm. I didn't even know this existed. And as time went on back and forth there, then I approached it in a different way. I was like, wow, look at all these people that need help. And my first thing was like, I felt sorry for them, and that it's not what they want. But then I started to kind of understand it, and you look at them, these are real people just going through things. And I still remember the one time I went in one of the patient's rooms that I look at their pictures, their family pictures, and I was like, wow, these people look so normal, like family time just like us, and now they're here. So that really opened up to really what people really are dealing with, real issues, not some of the so-called issues we call it we're having at home. And this was real for me, and I think if every kid can go down there and really see what's going on, then it's a great way to really understand it and raise awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. That's a great story. And interestingly enough, when we talk about cancer, sometimes not always, because before we always thought that cancer was in the family. I'm not going to use that word just in case I screw it up, but it's in the family. And sometimes we know that my grandmother had it, my mother had it, my aunts have it, my cousin have it. But when it comes to mental illness, is it necessarily something that's in the family, or it's something that can happen? Because sometimes, we hear of people who lose their jobs and they were basically attached to the job. They were the job. And when they lost that job, they felt that they lost their identity. And 2 days, 3 days, or 3 weeks later, you find out that this person jumps off a bridge, or many cases, now it's out in the open, but for a long time, women who gave birth and who were dealing with the after effects of hormonal swings and whatnot and suffered from postpartum depression. I mean, people were like, snap out of it. You're a mother. What are you talking about? What were you doing? And now we realize that, no, it's more than just snap out of it. So would you say that mental illness, it's not necessarily something that's, something that you find in the family? It can actually just be triggered by a fairly traumatic event?
I think it's definitely both, but anything can trigger it, and it's a matter of when it's triggered, it's a whole new world. You really don't know what you're going through. But if you're aware of it, it's like, wow, why am I behaving so strangely now? And you're not dealing with things how you used to deal with things. And it triggers, and that's when they start the chemicals really not operating properly within your body, and then it just has a domino effect from there.
What I can say from personal experience is you start to have these feelings that aren't right.
Yes.
I mean, it's very common when you're depressed to look at people you love and have no feeling. Just imagine looking at the people you love more than anything, your children, your husband, your family, and having no feeling. It's wrong, but you can't feel any other way. So then you turn it inwards and think there's something really wrong with me. Why am I feeling this way? You start to feel like a bad person. But it's, the awareness that those feelings are very typical, and they're kind of one of the first signs. There's been a lot of great commercials over the last few years showing things like that. Who does depression hurt comes to mind, things like that. And you think you see something a certain way, you start to get paranoia. And, it's those kinds of things that, even just to know those are typical of when the chemicals start to react, is, really of huge importance for someone who doesn't know what's going on. So the awareness will provide that platform for people not to look inwards and think they're a bad person and keep spiraling, but to actually say, this is common, this is an illness, no different than, when you have diabetes, you're told, if you go to the bathroom a lot, if you're thirsty, it's diabetes. Same thing, we want that kind of awareness with mental illness to be out there, for sure.
And somebody like yourself, Enza, I mean, you're very successful, and from the outside looking in, somebody can, wonder, well, it's impossible. She can't have suffered from mental illness. But I think that a number of celebrities and some business people have come out and said, perhaps many years later, when they were in fame, or very famous, should I say, or when they were in power at certain companies, and they came out and they said, during that time I was in power in such company, or during that time I was, everywhere you could, on all the billboards and all the theaters and number one on all the charts. I was suffering from depression. I was miserable. I would spend most of my time in my room. I couldn't get out. I couldn't get up. And it's amazing because there's that sort of dichotomy, the image that we see from the outside, because I think that we're all very good and very clever as humans, that we can cope, we can hide, we can put a facade, but inside we're just dying. So having people like yourself and some of the celebrities and some of the very successful entrepreneurs, men and women, come out and say, you know what, it's happened to me. And if it happens to me, it can happen to anybody. And if it does, then, you really have to take it more seriously than, I'm just in a rut. There may be something far deeper, far more complex going on inside you.
For sure. And the people we lose You know, we've had a prominent Toronto Maple Leaf just recently take his life. We hear that, and it just more and more proof that the awareness is not out there, that this person can be such a great, jovial type of person and still be struggling without anybody knowing exactly what you just said.
Our perception is that these people, they have it all. Well, how could they be upset about anything? And really, money does not get rid of the main issues that you're dealing with. And then they're too embarrassed because the perception is they have everything, so how can they come out and say, well, I really can't deal with this and I'm suffering. It's embarrassing for them, really, but they should have been. That's really what we're trying to do, to get people really to start talking about it.
That's a really good point. And if I could go back to what you said at the beginning, your organization deals with mental illness and drug dependency, is that correct?
Well, any kind of addiction.
Any kind of dependency.
Drugs, any kind of a dependency.
And why do you focus on that? What's the sort of the correlation with the mental illness?
Because, well, when you're addicted, it happens from the brain, really. It's the chemicals in the brain that feed you when you get whatever it is that you're addicted to. So it's the same but different. And we just felt when it came to mental illness, you know, there's more and more evidence. There's lots of other things that lump into that. I mean, bulimia, anorexia, all of these things. And but, you know, we just know that if we said mental illness and addiction, it would cover a broader base, and we want to cover as broad a base as possible.
There's definitely a huge correlation between the two.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. I didn't know that at all. I have heard that in some cases people who are addicted to one substance or one destructive behavior, that unless they get the counseling and they heal, then what happens is they can transfer that addiction into something else. So, you know, maybe it was cocaine and then all of a sudden it's, you know, sex or it's drugs or whatnot, unless they really seek the attention they need, and most importantly, they heal from whatever it is that's, you know, really traumatizing them.
It's masking the real issues of what they need to be dealing with.
And it's in some cases, I remember years ago, it's the same today, where they said bulimia and anorexia is a way of getting control when they feel there's no other controls in their life. Controlling what goes in and out of their body is the only control they have left. I don't know if that's the case today, but I remember thinking that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You know, you feel you have nothing else to control in your life.
You know what's interesting about even this conversation right now, in terms of you're asking opinions about addictions, how it's related, what have you. You know what? We're definitely not professionals. We're not doctors.
Yep.
We do not know the answers, but conversations like this will have people actually do some research on the internet, really look into what is the connection. You know what? I mean, and there's different interpretations of it, and it's just all conversation. So the more we keep talking about it, even when we have our major event, it's a great party and what have you, but what we get the most out of this event is how many people that night actually come up and start talking about it. Say, does this affect you at all? And
Absolutely.
all of a sudden, you're partying, but at the same time, you're really opening up in an environment that allows you to open up.
You're honoring that, you know, whatever it is you're dealing with, you want to talk about it because you're looking to get help or understanding or make people aware. So there's a lot of honoring of this is a real illness and it really needs to be understood.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yes.
I can, and I think that if anybody watching this may sort of encounter or be in interaction with somebody else who's complaining about being in a rut, or perhaps is seeing some addictive behavior, perhaps that person may not judge, and which would be sort of the first reaction that most of us would have, and might say, well, wait a minute, there may be something a little deeper here. Either them listening or them saying, hey, you know what, have you considered, you know, going and seeing a professional, maybe a little more complex than just you being, you know, moody or under the weather or whatnot.
How many people, if you're talking to them, and we may all be guilty of it, where you're talking to somebody and they come across as like totally all over the place, and you know, we leave there saying, what a whack job. Really, but there's something there. So if we kind of look at them differently, and I've had it happen a couple of times recently now where I've introduced people to other people that are suffering, and their first impression is that, but now they catch themselves saying, wow, okay, they're whacked up, but no, maybe they're going through something. Maybe I should ask different questions. We had a meeting with somebody that suffers ADD. I mean, he was all over the place, but he told us up front he suffers from it, and the meeting went fantastic because he stopped and was like, okay, you're off track. And so I said, oh, okay, thanks. So he just went back on track to what he was talking about. And that alone, if you would have told me that 3 years ago, I would have been like, oh, okay, I gotta go. I have another appointment, I gotta run. Now it's like, so now he opens up, we deal with it differently, and that therapy, you can't pay for that.
We go beyond. When the person can say, look, I have this illness, you can say, okay, so he's got that illness, I need to listen a different way, I need to really react in a different way, and then the real substance of the conversation, the communication is able to flow through once you put that out there and just acknowledge this is the case.
Absolutely. So instead of coming at it with judgment, you actually are much more open-minded. And what you just described there, Benny, is a great example. I mean, if you didn't know, you'd be like, okay, this is a complete waste of my time. This guy has an issue and I'm not dealing with it. Whereas him coming up, front to the forefront, my gosh, this morning, woo, and admitting that he suffers from ADD, then obviously people around the table aren't going to think this guy has a problem. They're going to think differently. They're going to listen differently. Listen differently and not judge him. They'll know in advance. Okay, you know what?
I'm judging them as opposed to listening to what they have.
Exactly.
That comfort level that the awareness will create, where people, it'll just become, this is what I have. People will say it more openly, and that judgment will go away, and so will the stigma and all the other horrible things that go with it. There'll be more of a tolerance and a compassion that goes with it, and that's what leads to treatment and recovery for people.
Absolutely.
To all you business people out there, every time you see people in a hat, think of mental health and awareness and talk openly about it.
Absolutely. I interviewed not long ago somebody I know Cindy Ashton, very, very talented singer, and I was telling her when we were talking about how in our busy lives we just are speed, we're focused, and now everybody's like really looking down at their mobiles. And I was telling her that once I came across this woman who was, I thought at first sniffling, and I realized, no, she's not sniffling. She's absolutely crying, serious crying. And when you're crying seriously in public, there's something deep going on. And I remember saying to her, I had two options. I could have just kept walking and thinking, I don't know her. I most likely will never see her again, and it's not my problem what she has. Or I can stop. And I stopped. I said, are you okay? Do you need any help? Do you need me to make a phone call? Do you need to call anybody? And she said, no, I'm okay. And I said, are you sure? Because I can stay with you here, no problem, whatnot. And I felt that she, was okay, and I moved on. But Cindy was saying that, you don't know what this woman was going through that day. And maybe you just stopping and acknowledging her and her pain may have saved her life. And it's amazing how a lot of us are rushing, and we don't actually see the signs that could actually potentially save somebody. So hopefully whatever she was going through that day, she felt that day that somebody was there, that if she needed to talk, I was going to drop whatever it was that I was doing, and I was going to talk to her. If she needed me to make a call, I was going to do it. I just wanted to make sure she was okay.
Well, hats on to you for doing that.
You brought up a great point in terms of seeing the signs, and it just hit me right now. Before we even went onto this road, I really didn't even know Enza that well when you went through a bout. And in terms of the signs now, if I'm not aware of what this disease is all about, what am I looking for? Mm-hmm. I don't know any signs. Okay, so they're down, whatever. There's no signs. And now, if you're aware of all the disease in general, and you see somebody not behaving their normal self, now maybe we can interject. Somebody says, I'm not feeling well, and I feel this lump or this and that. Well, go to the hospital right away, because those are signs. Now, so now it's all correlating in terms of understanding it and dealing with it.
And if I could add to that, Benny, again, from a person's point of view, it's usually those around you that see it before you do when you are going through it. Absolutely. I know that they're my radar. My husband, my children would say, you're a little off today. Maybe we should just kind of cool it or chill or whatever they happen to be feeling. And then it makes me be more aware of what am I feeling like inside. Because so often we don't really listen. What are we feeling? What's going on? We're just, as you said before, rushing.
We are. Something happened to me a few years ago in June 2008, and I really will never forget it because I was on the subway waiting, and I read. I'm an avid reader, and I was reading, and I saw from the corner of my eye the subway coming, and at the same time, I saw somebody jump and run towards the subway. My brain just went into kick mode and into reactive mode and seeking safety. I didn't wait for anything. I didn't know what was happening. The only thing is I have to get out of here. I have to get out of here. So I started running up the stairs. And as I was running, I was saying to people, get out, get out, get out, get out. And I was at the top of the stairs when I didn't see anything, but I heard. And I got out of the subway and I tried to make my way around the city. But I saw some people who had seen what had happened. And they were crushed and crying and traumatized. And I remember on the subway, people were talking, they were like, oh my God, because of course it was affecting their commute. But I was thinking, what happens for you to be so down, so low, you've lost so much hope that the only way out is to run towards, like literally, the subway's coming, you're running towards it. And I remember asking a few friends because I was really lost. I was like, it was a tragic event, and I was a little shaken, of course. And a lot of my friends didn't have any answers. And one of them said, well, you don't know, maybe that person was suffering from drugs and whatnot. But it really had affected me for a long time. And the question that I kept asking myself was, what happens in your life that brings you down so much that the only way out is, you're not going to take pills. You're running towards a subway. So,
I can answer that. And a lot of times, sometimes it's reactive. We go through some kind of trauma, change in career, job, family, someone passing away. But when the chemicals start, it's not even about being down. You could have everything around you, but those chemicals make your brain and you feel down and feeling like there's no way out. So many different people all over the world, different ages, different backgrounds. Why do they all end up at that horrible possibility of suicide if they're not treated? Because the chemicals lead you to that. It's totally chemically driven that makes you think you have no way out.
So basically, us fooling ourselves and thinking that, oh, we could deal with it. In reality, there's certain situations where, okay, maybe it is a 1 or 2 day event, but when it becomes a repetitive thing in our lives, then it's really time for us to seek professional help, because obviously it's way more than just a mood swing.
That's right. That's right.
Well, running a sort of a charitable organization, I like to say, really is comparing it to running a small business. And you guys have been able to generate quite a lot of attention and raise a lot of money for your cause. So I wanted to maybe talk about that and understand, how do you do it? Benny, you talked about a gala where people were able to come in and have fun and become more aware. If you could talk about that a little bit more. And I also know from discussions with you, Enza, that your efforts have been trickling into other organizations that need your expertise.
I'll talk about our gala event, and then I can talk about how we're kind of branching out into other, not events and what have you, to raise funds. But basically, we've made a pledge to PAMH, Center of Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto, a $270,000 pledge within 5 years. And in our first 2 events, we've raised over $120,000 to date, which has been very successful. And we have volunteered, dispatched a volunteer lounge right at the facility of CAMH, and it's just in construction as we speak. And by this lounge, it'll be called basically our Hats Off for Awareness, a volunteer lounge. And we're hoping that we can host events, other family members can have events at the location, at this lounge, so basically to keep people talking about it more, really bringing the mainstream to utilize the facility together for whatever reason they'd like. And what we do is we have our main gala event every year. Last couple of years we've had over 500 people attend. We're hoping to hit 700 this year, so let's spread the word. And basically it's not a typical fundraiser event. It's not a sit-down dinner. We keep it very cocktail type of setting, just tables around, everybody. We just want people all walking around, talking to each other. We have Michael Burgess actually as our keynote speaker this year, which is fantastic. Mad Dog Amato from the Toronto radio station, 99.9 Virgin Radio will be our MCs. We'll have other guests there. A lot of celebrity TV designers within our industry will be attending. And it's just a great fun night. We don't want it, it is serious, but we don't give it that serious connotation. We want people to feel really comfortable and a nice, fun environment. And it's been very successful, and we continue to have that major gala event every year, but Enza will talk about some other ideas that we're working on as well.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, yeah, the word is spreading, and we have been approached by corporate companies. We're very proud. Can't see it yet, but we've been approached by corporate companies to say we want to make you the recipient. We like what you're doing. Or a lot of times there's a heartstring connection, is what we found. And not necessarily that they tell you at the beginning, but they will eventually kind of disclose why they chose our cause. And basically they have events and make us the benefactor of the funds that they raise. And what it does is it allows us to have other companies or other events that are helping to spread that awareness and, of course, ultimately making the funds that are needed. But it's raising the awareness and making that kind of spider web of, although it started primarily in our industry, and we've had great success and support from our industry, we're now looking at strategically branching out to other industries that also can jump on board, so it becomes more of a national. We're striving to have a national hats on for Awareness Day, and it definitely is going to happen. It's just a matter of when. We've partnered up with other charities that are also doing similar things that are great, whether it's letting them kind of pick our brain with what we've learned, or whether it's helping them out. We definitely give back that way. CAMH will call us and say someone is doing an event for them. Could I meet with them? And we're always happy to pass on what we've learned. But basically, from where we were, just 3 short years ago, we're really moving mountains. We've spread the awareness. Our voice is spoken loud and clear. The very eloquent Dr. Carolyn Bennett said that the first year, and said, "You've spoken loud and clear." And it was a cause that really needed a voice, and tonight you've given it a voice, and we were honored when she said that. I know for myself, 23 years ago, when I made the promise, I never thought it would be at that level. If Betty hadn't jumped on board, it may have been a barbecue in my backyard list. But it was meant to be, and we really feel that something is guiding us in this path, and the most amazing people that have come out to support. It's just our little baby that started as a seedling is really starting to get some really good roots and starting to sprout. We're very proud.
And if you are, or sorry, not if, but when you are able to get this hats off for Awareness Day, that will be huge, because I think that people will feel more comfortable in even just asking questions, and that's going to be huge when that happens.
What's great about what we're doing as well, in terms of the money's always very important. Especially for CAMH, and to keep things rolling along for where they do need some funds. But really, this is a charity and a foundation that we're building on. To basically, the awareness is the critical part of it. To get people always talking and to be open about it, to understand the disease, as opposed to needing money for new equipment, new machinery. It's a little different angle, only because it's all dealing with the mind and what you can and can't do. So that is huge for us. So the money is important, but really the awareness and everybody talking about it openly is much more critical.
And the awareness can save lives. I mean, let's face it. At the end of the day, and if we tie it back to entrepreneurs, it's much better to allow somebody who's working in your organization as an entrepreneur to heal, as opposed to finding out that something fairly tragic happened to them and you were oblivious, you didn't listen to the signs, or you were just focusing on your bottom dollar and not focusing on the person who was hurting.
And we've actually had a couple, and we did have a conversation about, wow, look how we handled this particular situation, knowing what we know now about mental mental illness and whatever, how we would have handled it differently. And it's nothing major, but even just little things within ourselves and the stress and, we've got. So.
Well, it can be major, right? We don't even know if we saved a life. You just don't know. I mean, the mind is so powerful. And I don't know if we'll ever truly understand it, but if you're aware of it and you just hopefully, the big guy up there knows if we're saving lives or not, and you know what, I mean, all you can do is help people as much as you can, and hopefully have a positive effect with people, and just keep going.
Cancer, they say detection. The earlier you find it, the better your chances for success. No different with mental illness and addiction. If when you start to see the signs early on, because you've been made more aware, you can sort of do something about it at the early stages. Hopefully it doesn't get to the really difficult stages that take months and months and various cocktails of medications to get you out of it. So again, detection of something's different with that person and putting yourself out there to say, hey, do you want to talk? For coffee, something. Letting them know, hey, I've noticed that I care. Sometimes that's what a person really needs when they're that isolated and feeling so alone.
Validation that they are, they're valuable, that basically you see them, that you hear them, that you're there for them. That's all we want as human beings. But I'm sure that when we're going through the ups and downs of mental illness, that's even more, the case. Well, Benny and Enza, thank you so much for being on the show, and I will have some information on Hats On for Awareness in the show notes, so if people want to find out more, or if people want to know more about your gala, and obviously, this is an organization that is in Canada and Toronto and whatnot, but I'm sure that around the world, there are some organizations, there are people like yourselves who are also affecting the lives of millions of people just because they're willing to come out and shine a light on this cause that really affects so many of us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.